Hello everyone, my name's Danny Wilson. I'm a strength and conditioning coach and co-founder of Boxing Science, and take great pleasure in welcoming you to the Boxing Science Summit 2019. Once a year we launch the Combat Conditioning online conference, which brings in experts of sports science within boxing and combat sports all together to deliver individual online video workshops. But never before have we got experts in a room and round a table to have a discussion about our knowledge, different areas of sports science, and sharing our different experiences as well. And this is something that we've put together in the Boxing Science Summit with myself, Danny Wilson, Dr. Alan Ruddock of Boxing Science, Rob Madden, physiotherapist and strength and conditioning specialist, and strength and conditioning coach Dan Lawrence. Also added in there is Dr. Scott Robinson, who's a sports nutritionist to many top boxers. So this is a discussion of sports science within boxing, all from different perspectives, different professions, but also we've got loads of different experiences as well, from amateurs all the way up to world champions. And in fact, from 5 of us, we've worked with over 10 world champions. We've worked with hundreds of athletes and we've got years of experience, and it's a great way to get all that information in one place. But before I start, I'd like to tell you about the Combat Conditioning online conference. We're back for another year and it's bigger and better than ever before. We have the speakers that are taking part in this discussion that will be giving you further insight into their knowledge and specific areas such as Dan's doing adapting around the boxer's shoulder, Rob Madden is working around the athlete's neck and spine, and Scott Robinson really delves into data-driven nutrition. And then added to this, we've got Dr. Duncan French, who is the Vice President of Performance at the UFC Performance Institute, and included in that, we've got our Train Like a Champion 2.0 remastered program. It's all included in one price. Not only are we giving you the knowledge and sharing our experience, we're also giving you the tools to be able to start applying this into your coaching and training environment. At the moment, there's pre-sale 50% discount on our Combat Conditioning Conference. This finishes on April the 30th. The link is in the description below, so please click on that for more information. If you're watching this video after April 30th, you can still access this and the link will be in the description. So now we're going to start the Boxing Science Summit. Hope you find it enjoyable. Make sure you take pen and paper and start writing down some key learning points from this. Hello everyone, it's Danny Wilson from Boxing Science, and I'm extremely proud and excited to be presenting this roundtable discussion, the Boxing Science Summit, which seems a bit dramatic as it's just 4 guys in a gym around some plyometric boxes, but we've got some great expertise in here coming from different perspectives, working at many different levels within boxing, from amateurs all the way up to world level, the very top of boxing. And because we're coming from different perspectives and we have different thoughts around a lot of different areas within boxing, I thought it'd be a good idea to bring us all together and just have it out, a big discussion about the key things, key themes within sports science. So some of the topics that we're going to be covering is key considerations in strength and conditioning, some of the implications around a boxer, some of the training loads and how we manage it and monitor it. We're also going to be talking about the weight making process and supplementation use within boxing. And also we're going to be introducing some of the conditioning methods that we like to use and some of the methods that we like to use to try and reduce the likelihood of injury and prevent injuries. Okay. Before we get started, I'm going to allow us to introduce ourselves. We've got Dan Lawrence, Rob Madden, and of course myself, Danny Wilson, and good friend and colleague Alan Ruddock. So we'll start off with Dan to introduce yourself.
Cheers, Danny. Hi guys, my name's Dan Lawrence. I've worked in boxing for over 5 years. I'm head of performance for Matchroom Boxing Gym over in Essex with Tony Sims. I've worked with the likes of George Groves and currently work with Conor Benn, Joe Cordina, Martin J. Ward, to name a few. I'm very much looking forward to today.
Hi guys, I'm Rob Madden. Know these guys for a little while now, know Dan for probably 3 or 4 years. Big passion for boxing. I've been lucky to have worked in it probably for most of my career, initially with just amateurs in London and more in more recent years with professionals, having worked with Anthony Joshua, James DeGale, Lawrence Coley as well, and helping out some of the Matchroom guys when needed. Background is a physio over a decade and passion for S&C. Studied my certified S&C specialism course from the States a few years back. So enjoy the fitness side as well as the injury management, and got a big interest in training loads as well. So hope we can get some good chats going around that.
Yep, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Alan Ruddock. I'm a physiologist. So I like to study how the body responds and adapts to exercise. So if you've seen any of the boxing science work that we've done, I'm the guy that pushes people to their max on the treadmill or the bike until they can do no more. I've worked with a range of different athletes in a range of different sports, all the way from juniors up to elite boxers. I'm very much looking forward to this round table discussion. I think we're going to bring some unique insights, and me and Danny was actually working out how many world champions we've collectively worked with. And I think we counted 11, didn't we? Between us four here and Scott Robinson as well. He'll also be coming in onto the discussions in a separate part. But I think you're gonna really enjoy this. You're gonna get a very unique insight into the way that we work, and I hope you all get a lot from this.
Yeah, my name's Scott Robinson. I've got my own consultancy which primarily focuses on performance nutrition and exercise physiology. So I'm a nutritionist and physiologist by nature or by trade. And so a little whistle-stop tour of kind of my background. I studied at Liverpool John Moores University for 4 years. So I did a bachelor's and then master's in sports physiology there, and then progressed on to do a PhD at the University of Birmingham in exercise metabolism. Just after that, I went whilst I was doing the PhD, I worked part-time for a company called Guru Performance, who were based in central London in the Mayfair area. So they had their own lab there, and we kind of worked with a range of different clients, from elite level athletes right through to kind of like businessmen and businesswomen, private bankers, etc. So that was a good experience. Over probably the last 2 years, I set up my own consultancy, which is where I work one-to-one with a wide range of clients, including professional boxers and fighters, also with some Premier League football players, and then also in the professional motorsport domain as well, some race car drivers. So yeah, quite a good mix of athletes and experiences there. In terms of working in boxing, what's my favourite thing about working in boxing? I'd have to say that it's helping the lads to do it safely and do it well. I think that's the most important thing. All too often I see athletes putting themselves through the mill to make the weight, and often using unsafe and dangerous practices to hit the scales and make sure it's the right number. When in fact, actually, with a little bit of education and putting the right principles and strategies in place, you can help them do it much easier, and therefore improve the quality of their camp, the quality of their performance, ultimately the quality of their lives as well, because these guys are in a long camp. Sometimes it's 8 weeks, sometimes it's 12 or even 16 weeks, which is a long time. So if I can help them along the way and ultimately make them a happier athlete that's performing better, then I'd say that's definitely the best part of the job, really.
Cool. Now I'll do a quick introduction about my background. I've been working in boxing for around about 6 or 7 years now. I've worked with a range of amateur boxers, from people that are just having their first bout all the way up through to people on the international stage, working with England boxing. I also got a good experience in professional boxing, working with rising professionals such as Jordan Gill and Steve Fowler. I also worked with world champions such as Cal Brook and Jamie McDonnell, and also got to mention Gavin McDonnell if I'm mentioning Jamie.
Got to mention the brother.
Good stuff. So as we go around, before we get stuck into the kind of the main things that we want to talk about, we want to talk about the main reasons why we enjoy working in boxing. I know us four, we've got a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, but we've also got a lot of passion for what we do, and that's why we're sitting here Friday, a little bit cold, wanting to talk about this and share it with people that are wanting to get a little bit more out of their performance, get more out of their athletes as well. So I'll start off with Alan. What are the main things that you like?
Yeah, so the main thing that I really like about working with the boxers is that they push themselves to the absolute limit. And with what I do in fitness and conditioning, I need that engagement. I need my athletes to be pushed on into the red zone and even further, so that we can get the right adaptations. But you don't get that unless you have an athlete that buys into what you're trying to get from them, and you want to try and improve them in a certain particular way. If you've got an athlete that's just not engaging in that process, it makes it so much more difficult. But the boxers give everything, 110%, and that makes our job, my job, so much easier, to get the adaptations that we want from them. And that's a major thing why I like it, because we can test things out in the right way. We can get the data, we can get the fitness improvements, and that we know there's no compromise, very little compromise in terms of their effort, and we can really get a deep dive into how they respond to training and get a very true picture of that as well. So we're confident in a lot of things that we do works, but we're only capable of doing that because the boxers give us everything in every session, as much as possible.
I think that's a case in point, is what the boxers give to it. And one of the quick wins, I know we're going to go to training load management and managing stress later on, but you never have to push these guys harder in boxing, in combat sports in general. Some quick wins maybe to actually pull back in certain aspects, obviously not with the adaptations you're trying to elicit from the higher intensity work. But no, I completely agree. They give everything to the cause.
Absolutely. Yeah. Following on from that, one of the key things that I enjoy is being able to explore our knowledge and our experience and put it into a 12-week, 10-week program and try and explore different training methods. Because I've worked in football, I've worked in rugby, where they've got a game every weekend, or maybe in football where they've got a game twice a week or something like that. You're very restricted to what you can do and what you can't. I think with boxing, even though some of the things that we're going to be talking about, like training load and weight making process and being tight in different areas, can restrict us, but really we've got free range to do whatever we want to do. Wherever we want to train. Obviously it's got to be evidence-based, it's got to fit around the sparring and the boxing training as well, but mostly over a 10-12 week period we've got the freedom to be able to do whatever we want.
Yeah, I think following from Alan, I have to agree that that's the big reason why I've loved working with the pros as well as amateurs to an extent, but the pros, taking them through the full journey of a camp and really seeing the quite unique mindset that those athletes have, that grit and that determination that allows them to go that extra mile every single time. And then consequently from that, you raised the question just now, Danny, about the challenges we face directly. I think that sometimes because of that extra mile and that extra push, we end up with these athletes pushing too much, and one of the big challenge we face is when to pull, and we'll come on to that. when do we pull them back as a team with uniformed information and as a group to say, guys, let's come off the reins a little bit, put the reins on even, and give them a few extra days rest. And that's for me the biggest challenge in boxing, because I think I've seen it many times when the athlete just keeps going, and then they get more tired, and yet they still keep going. So I think we're getting better, but we still got a way to go with that.
Yeah.
I use the volcano analogy on that to my boxers. Obviously, we can use this terminology well enough here around this square table. But
box.
but in terms of build up of stress, so I use a lot of analogies with these guys. Otherwise, they just don't understand it. I need them to understand and use the word buy-in, and that's big in obviously high performance these days. With the likes of Brett Bartholomew, but if they want to buy into what you're trying to say, something I use is the volcano analogy. You just get this build up of stress, and at some certain points, it will then have to erupt if you're not managing it properly. So back to the initial question in terms of what I like a number of things in boxing. We all have extreme passion. I think that's evident for this sport. For me, again, I kind of alluded to the buy-in there. I get the buy-in from the athletes, and I know they're really buying into the process and what I'm trying to do when they start talking my language. So yes, I dumb things down to a certain degree, but case in point, he won't mind me saying this, John Ryder messaged me today, and he said, stress, recover, adapt, in 3 words. And I was like, and that for me, it shows he's really listening to what I'm saying to him, and he really is now starting to understand the training process. It's not just about going hard and applying stress. The magic happens after that. When we have the recovery strategies in place. Conor Ben as well, in a few videos at BXR, one of the gyms I work at in town, they were trying to get him on the old social media and Instagram. So we did a session. He sat by the ring rope and spoke to them. I then looked back. I got the train home. Checked on the Instagram, which I spend way too much time on, and he was like, yeah, just been here with my strength and conditioning coach, it's all about getting strong, applying high amounts of force. And I was like, perfect. Proud dad moment, literally. Honestly, that for me is what I love. Obviously you love the fact it is an end goal. We work towards an end goal. Yes, we have various hurdles along the way. It's never a linear path, but and coming out on fight night, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
That's very, it's a proud moment for me, because we've been on that journey. And also at that point, it's like, as much as yes, we play a role, it is an important role. I'm not going to sit here and say it isn't, especially on camera, but our role is done at that point. After maybe the warm-up strategy, it's down to the fighter, So there's my 2.
Yeah, it is. That I was going to say that the top and bottom of it, it's exciting. Seeing that the work that you've put in is going into such an exciting event, whether that's at Peterborough Arena where we were at the weekend, or Millennium Stadium twice, Wembley twice,
Madison Square.
Joe said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We've all worked in amateur boxing. We've worked the whole way up to the top of the summit, so to speak. And as long as the athlete buys into you and your methods, and you take them on the journey, it really doesn't matter where you are. The end goal remains the same.
Absolutely, yeah.
It always surprises me when what we write down on paper and then implement works at the end. It's like, this actually does work. This is amazing. I do know a little bit about what I'm saying. But that's satisfying when it all comes together. Yeah, and the plan works. For us, it starts on a big whiteboard sometimes, doesn't it? Planning it out, months ahead, and it's just squiggles on a whiteboard.
Meticulous planning.
Yeah.
Always.
So some of the things that were mentioned there, talking about like being part of the team, part of the jigsaw. That brings on to the key considerations working with the boxer. And my point that I want to say is, from my perspective, being the strength and conditioning coach, I kind of know my place, even though it's like a big part of the team. But where does strength training actually come? If you talk about hierarchy, you've got your sparring, you've got your bag work, you've got your pad work as well, and then you've got your conditioning, and probably strength work is going to come a fifth place. Even though it's really important, you can't think that, right, this are going to try and optimise the physiological adaptations from the strength training. That can have a big impact on the conditioning a big impact on the sparring and the technique work as well. So you kind of like have to think about, right, how important is the strength work and in terms of each camp. So like for example, let's say we're doing heavy strength training. This boxer needs to improve the maximum strength. Ideally, they need to improve their back squat. So you know, whenever I've done a back squat training, I'm sore the next day. I'm tight. I'm imagining like what that is for the boxer as well. So like, I think that is a massive consideration. So you can't just see it in black and white. This boxer needs to improve the back squat in order to get strong. But what methods can you put in place to make sure that you can still improve that, but not have a detrimental impact on the training?
I think, on that you've got to look on the macro level as opposed to the micro level. We'd be a bit egotistical to say, I think you touched on it there, Al, about writing things down and how the program evolution starts. One thing I'd say is don't be married to your program. We need to act on the fly. Yes, we have some strategy and structure to this overall process, but be willing to adapt and overcome tends to be what I say. Think macro, not micro. So I could present so many different instances where this happens, where the fighter would come, we go through our basic biomarkers, we do our kind of neuromuscular fatigue testing and monitoring, but just having a conversation with them, okay, what have you done this week, what have you got tomorrow, and they're flat as a pancake, so I've then got a relatively high volume session. Well, I'm obviously not going to adhere to that session because I've got to look at, okay, they've got sparring tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. There is a bigger pitch to be had for sure.
I think for me, I'm probably going to mention a few different things that fit into our different areas, but our boxers are undergoing a process of adaptation, and those adaptations take time, but you've also got this goal at the end of camp. They've got to fight. Now sometimes what we want to get out of them physiologically and the adaptations that we want to induce from them don't always sit right in terms of the camp length, or they might not sit right in terms of the opponent that they're facing as well. But understanding the length of the camp is very important to understand what adaptations you can drop in and try and induce at what particular point in time, and perhaps if you've got a plan that's maybe 2 or 3 fights ahead as well, and you kind of got a bit of an understanding of where your particular boxer or athlete is at in their journey towards their ultimate goal, that also helps a lot as well. Related to the adaptations and the time length as well, I think we really need to consider the athlete's training history. So for example, we haven't trained Jamie and Gavin McDonnell the same as we have with Jordan and Fowler. Jamie and Gavin have got a very well established training history, training a particular type of way. They're very aerobic athletes, and they're, and they'll admit it, they're not the strongest, they're not the most forceful. Now, one of the things we like to do in our program is to introduce a lot of forcefulness in our athletes and a lot of high intensity work, but sometimes you can't do it, and you do need to acknowledge the training history and the strengths of their athlete. And so we, in terms of their conditioning, have taken a longer approach and tried to hit more around aerobic capacity, so longer high intensity intervals rather than the short ones that you would see a lot of our guys doing on the curve. And I think this is probably relevant to you as well, Rob, is injury history. And that's a huge one. Whether they've got something that will, limit certain exercises that they do in the gym in their strength, or whether it's, they may have a sore Achilles, which means they can't do X, Y, Z in conditioning, or they can't go on a long road run, or do something like that. That's another thing. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, yes, they've got to fight at the end of the camp, but they've also got to make weight. And how much weight do they need to drop, and when is a huge consideration for us, because if they need to drop a lot of weight and they're in a big energy deficit, that impairs what we can do. Definitely. In S&C, and it's a big thing that we've got to work around. So for me, those are the the major challenges and considerations that we need to make in terms of programming, and then we can start to think about where we put in our little jigsaw puzzle pieces to try and make that puzzle.
I think to follow on from that, the key thing for me that is ideal for any pro setup is that the team process and the team communication is very, very good. And gathering the right level of data, you may have one person for that, if you're lucky to have a performance or a data analyst who can feed into physio, technical coaches, S&C coaches, but generally however many people are involved with a fighter, you all need to be talking on a day-to-day basis to be able to make the right decisions. That's what it is, isn't it? The data informs us to make our best decisions so that on the fight night they're coming in at the top of that peak and they're not coming in over it. And it could be a small thing where I've seen, over the years, the energy's low, the resting heart rate's up a little bit, the sleep was off. You ring the coach and you ask him, how was he yesterday in the spar? Yeah, he was a bit slow, wasn't himself. Okay, cool. What have you got planned today? Oh, he's got a hard session today and we really need him to do it because we're getting close to fight night. And the coach wants him to hit that spar because he historically, psychologically needs it. And then you need to be able to have the guts as an individual or as a team to say, you know what, he's probably run down or he's overtrained, slightly overtrained. Let's step back, as I said earlier. As a team, let's say, look, give him X amount of time off, or just adapt and change the session so he doesn't do that heavy spar. He does a green level of training, a low intensity, or he works on some good movement work. So he's not dormant. And it's however many times I've seen that go the other way, and he does 2 days of hard training, and then come the weekend he's got a cold and he's run down or whatever it might be. So, I've never been in a setup where it's perfect. That's the crazy thing. And every mistake I've seen happen in elite sport, 9 times out of 10 it's because communication's not been there, because one person's forgotten to tell this person, or the coach hasn't told you something. So you can never over communicate as a team, right? And it's ever as easy as ever to communicate through our phones and all the various methods we have to communicate. So that would be my thing around. That's the biggest, most important thing, and also a challenge. So
yeah. One of the things that I was going to say about the most challenging part of working in boxing is chaotic.
Oh yeah.
It's so chaotic. Not only from you don't know when your athlete's fighting. My girlfriend's having a go at me all the time, like going, right, when can we book an holiday? When can we book that? I'm like, I don't know when they're fighting at all, so I don't know. And then there's so many clashes and everything like that. But it's not only from that perspective in terms of like programming, but it's talking about the day-to-day one. And as a strength and conditioning coach, as a physiotherapist, as a physiologist as well, you've got to be adaptable to work in this sport. You can't be like saying mighty program, thinking that we've got to hit this exercise, we've got to hit these sets and reps, we've got to hit this certain workout. Sometimes you might just have to say, look, just do your stretches, burn some calories on cross trainer, and get yourself off. It doesn't sit in our kind of sports science remit sometimes, but we've got to think about that training load management and making sure that they're getting through the camp.
Case in point on that, and I think I showed you a minute ago, one of my fighters actually messaged me just prior to us starting this. We massively pulled back on our session, our strength and conditioning session on Wednesday, knowing he had sparring today. And he messaged me and said, look, I've just had one of the best spars I've ever had. Thanks for that the other day. And it's just, again, it's managing that on a macro instead of a micro level. If I was egotistical and married to what we had set and set structure, and I am a sucker for structure, then, would he have had that good spar? Probably not. And leading on to what Rob was saying there, Dr. Fergus Connolly talks about it, about having synergy between different departments. And for me, an open line of communication is absolutely paramount. It is like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy with boxing coaches. It's not. They are at the top of the pyramid, but everything must feed into for one key goal, and that is to improve the fighter. So if that means you have to have a hard conversation every now and again, then so be it.
You know what? You backed off the other day. Now he's had an awesome spar. Now his confidence is up, and he's now taking that in to next week, you know, and you're probably going to get more out of his training next week.
Exactly.
You know, that's going to have you know, he's going to have a massive beneficial effect.
And what you said to start this out was in regards to like these guys work super hard, you know, when you're trying to elicit the adaptations in the red zone runs, etc. And the great thing we've got in boxing is, like we say, we haven't ever got to push them that much harder. So when you can kind of get them to pull back a little bit and they see the benefits from that, then that's great, because they're not BSing us, you know. It's not like we're working in a sport where you have to constantly get on at them to work harder. If they say they are fatigued, then you better believe they're pretty fatigued, you know. So obviously our markers should have told us that prior to that, but yeah.
I think, and around that as well, I was just thinking as you guys were talking, the psychology of the structure is massive for those athletes. They're type A. If they know what their week looks like, Wednesday I'm lifting, Friday I'm sparring, and you come in, you've got to have really good grounds to say you're not lifting today, because psychologically they've prepared themselves for that. So then they've set themselves up for failure. So then you're telling them, sorry mate, oh, you feel a bit tired, we're going to miss a session. No, you've got to be able to over-inform and say, look, we've done X, Y, and Z, you know, neuromuscular test, your counter movement jump, you might be looking at resting heart rate, whatever you've got your hands on, to say, look, and the fact, this is a great story, because you've actually had, it's not just a process, but a process that's shown us that your boxer is in a good point with his education. Because he can actually say, he respects you for pulling back. Imagine if you'd only just started with him and you said, you know what, I'm not going to do anything with you today. He'd think, well, who's this guy telling me not to lift?
Me not to,
but he's actually grateful for you doing nothing. That's brilliant.
Yeah, nice.
It's a great relationship.
Fantastic.
There you go.
Thanks, bud.
So that's bringing us on to programming and training load management. I think that's kind of fitted in nicely. So we'll start off with programming. Alan, what are the key things for you when we're putting a program together?
I think we've alluded to quite a lot of things in the past 5 minutes or so, that there is a lot of things to consider. You know, the training loads of boxers are very high. They want to do a lot of training. There's a lot of aspects to the training, and what we need to, or certainly what I think is very important in terms of programming, is knowing what the smallest worthwhile effect is, or the minimum effective dose, because we don't want to be that guy that pushes them over the edge, because then the trust is lost with the boxer, the trust is lost with the coach, and as soon as you give them a session that tips them over the edge and they have a bad spar, you know, things are turning sour pretty quickly. And so having the knowledge and understanding as to what is effective and for how long it's effective is really, really important to optimize the training process, because yes, you want to give them that strain, but you don't want to have that strain that's continuing for too long. And you definitely don't want to be doing too much in terms of overreaching, unless it's very planned and everyone's on the same page with it, you know. So you really do need to know what that minimal effective dose is, and you need to be brave enough to say that's enough, you know, and that comes a lot from collecting data, doesn't it? And managing it. And
similar to what you're saying about the minimal effective dose, when our strength conditioning coach Tommy Monday, right mate, when he started doing his dissertation in his third year, he was like, what can we do to have a big impact? And what we did was finding what the best, like kind of most optimal percentage 1RM on a trap bar deadlift was, and we found it that it was quite individual, but we found that like basically when we're doing individual programming, we know where to target them. So for example, Jordan Gill, he's around about 50% 1 rep max, whereas like Fowler would be a little bit heavier because it's a bit stronger. But if we can still get strength adaptations from going at a lower percentage 1 rep max, then we're going to hit that. So when we found out that data, I was like, right, with velocity based training now, I'm going to do a load velocity profile, and I'm going to see how much we can get away with not doing maximum strength training. So the key, we did a few different variables, but the main one that I'm going to talk about is one that we did with Carl Yousaf, where I was thinking, right, he's got to make flyweight, what is it, 5'8".
In terms of height?
Height.
Yeah, he's about 5'7".
Yeah, tall. He's a tall flyweight. You wouldn't believe it. And he's got that frame that he could probably go up to bantamweight, maybe even super bantamweight. But he's at flyweight at the minute. And now just thinking, right, he's going to be in a calorie deficit for most of the camp. If he's does maximum strength training, he's probably going to get sore from that and fatigue from that. I thought, right, I'm going to work in reverse. So we started speed, strength, speed. Did 2 or 3 weeks on max strength, then brought it up back down to speed, strength. So, and then at the back end of camp, we did a load velocity profile, and it's making 10 to 15% improvements across lower percentage 1 rep max, and he maintained maximum strength. And when you're thinking about, what we're doing strength and conditioning for, is to produce a lot of force in a short amount of time.
So you were hitting strength power early as well, did you say?
Yeah, speed strength early. Yeah. So we were doing trap bar jumps at about 30%, 40% 1 rep max, and then working up towards like 70% 1 rep max on a trap bar. Obviously using velocity-based training, and then we worked towards like 90% 1 rep max for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then we dropped it totally. And what we found was that it's improving 10-15% at the lower end, which we want him to, because I'd prefer him to be doing that at that end, improving at that end, because that's where he's going to be producing force. If we can maintain maximum strength by doing the minimum amount of work, I think that's a huge win. So I was talking about the minimum effective dose and programming and kind of leaving the ego at the door when it comes to strength training. I'd love my boxers to lift hundreds of kilos and stuff like that, but really I've got to think, what are the demands of the sport? It's to be fast, it's to be explosive. How can we achieve that without having an impact on the...
We did the same thing as well in a similar vein with cluster sprints. So a 30-second sprint interval, what we found through our research, and we've done a couple of tiny little research projects, but then we did a master's dissertation on this as well. We found that when you cluster 30-second intervals, you actually get a higher peak and mean speed for a slightly greater internal intensity, but that external increase in speed and force production was so much greater than a 30-second interval. So if you can find ways in which to keep the volume the same but maximize intensity, so it was the time was exactly the same. So we were doing 30-second intervals compared to 10 on, 10 off, 10 on, 10 off, 10 on. So 30-second clustered and sliced. We're finding that we were getting higher speeds and a greater external intensity for the same
in a strength-based environment. So when we utilise cluster work using velocity-based training, so we're getting better peak velocities on the same load. So quality of work, increasing motor unit recruitment, etc., is optimised. And also you alluded to the fact there about kind of force production. We're not working in powerlifting. It's not just a matter of getting from A to B. I know this is very basic, but everything's managed by time. So it's not just about how much force you can produce, it's the rate at which you can produce that force. So absolutely we need to surf that force velocity curve, and this is why we profile individuals as well. We can all now probably sit here and think of an athlete, of where you position them on that force velocity curve. Specifically, I know a couple now who, I'll allude to one, John Ryder. John Ryder is incredibly force dominant. We joke around because his nickname's the Griller, because when we get him doing A-skip drills, literally the floor is moving. It's just funny, but yeah. So in essence, some big wins for us. Yes, we want to make his strength super strengths, but we can also actually prioritise a lot more kind of reactive component and velocity specific work that's actually going to improve that fighter and how quickly they can produce force. And
to intersect, because I think you guys actually really interested me a year or two ago when I was talking to Dan about how you periodise your camps, and just to maybe make a comment and also a question to you both and Dan as well. My comment being, it surely makes sense to, just from a training stimulus perspective, to have your velocity-based training, your strength speed work in early on in the camp as well, right? Because if we follow only a linear progression of, okay, strength, endurance, general prep, strength, endurance, strength, pure power at the end, but what happens if week 7 of a 10-week camp, the athlete encounters an illness for 10 days or a niggle, right? And then you're running out of time to get that adaptation. So that my comment is, I think you were one of the first people that I really saw pushing that, you know, throughout, like almost little 3-week blocks of everything. And therefore my question being, and it is not a clear answer, is for the viewers as well, how should we be periodising a 10-week camp? Big question.
That's a big question, and the cop out is it depends on the situation. But when you're talking about like inclusion of like kind of some explosive work and everything like that, not leaving it all to the last minute,
Exactly, yeah.
we do actually integrate like stuff in the warm up, extended warm up. We do some like loaded counter movement jumps. We know like, right, if we've got a speed strength block, a trap bar deadlifts, we're not just going to go, right, 7 weeks of just normal lifting, then next minute you're going to do trap bar deadlifts. Actually, it shifts from an extended warm up exercise going into their trap bar deadlifts, and then in the next block it'd be trap bar jumps as a key exercise. So that's how I'd kind of manage that. And there's a few different ways that I've done it. Doing like some sort of like complex training where you'll do a maximal say 90% 1 rep max lift paired with a jumping explosive exercise. Also like contrast training. So we've done 3 sets of 3 on a trap bar deadlift above 85% 1 rep max, and then we do a trap bar jump at 30%, 40% 1 rep max, 3 sets of 3 on that. So then you're still getting your maximum strength work, you're still getting your explosive work. Mainly we're looking at maximum strength, but you've still got that kind of explosive stimulus there to then work into the next camp. So when they're on the next phase of camp, they're doing it a little bit fresher, should be hitting higher numbers.
That with the sort of post-activation potentiation stuff, the contrast work that you're alluding to, which is fantastic, and as you say, you're hitting quite a big aspect of that training graph. Volume-wise, how do you adapt to the boxer? As you know, how do you know the amount to periodise, and how do you know when you maybe need to do a bit less, and what kind of things do you use to judge?
Well, it's a little bit hard one really. We start from baseline and we make sure that we're only making like 20% increase load, like a week by week basis, and then making sure that they're having a deload. A perfect example would be to do a 3-to-1 deload, but 9 times out of 10 a camp isn't going to go like that. I've just done a 12-week camp for Fowler in terms of like conditioning, and his loads were 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3 going there. Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in it if it's 12 weeks, but that's more or less the theme. So it was like 3 blocks of 4 weeks, but it was like high, medium, and then low, because it's gone high when I know that it's not going to be doing much sparring.
There you go, yeah.
And I'm thinking, right, it's my time to get my adaptations in there and really challenge him and hammer him basically. And then the middle stage would be to like, right, it's a bit of a transition phase. I can still push him, but I don't want to push him too much because his sparring load's going to go up. And then the last 3 weeks is where we're just like, we call it tickling phase, where basically you're taking a backward step, you're just working around the high sparring loads and everything like that.
And so essentially a reverse process, which makes a lot of sense. And I think maybe I would suggest that, I don't know, worldwide, that certainly isn't the case with all fighters, and if anything, the S&C is running alongside the boxing, and it's up and up and up. And actually they're coming into like week 8 of a 10-week camp, and they're pushing their strength power development, and they're well over the hill come fight night. So, you know, I think the way you're approaching it makes a lot of sense. How about you, Dan?
I think, yeah, very similar. I think in essence what we're trying to elicit an adaptive response. So in essence, if you've got an increase in boxing volumes, i.e. via sparring at whatever point they get introduced into the camp, this is again where the open line of communication needs to be strong, because as strength and conditioning coaches, we need to be aware of that, because if we're then trying to climb the same mountain and these two collide, then we're just inducing them upon way too much stress. So in terms of the adaptations that we're trying to elicit from our sessions, we're just not going to get them.
No, if we were to think about this very black and white and very simply, our role is to prepare the boxers to be in the best shape possible for sparring, you know, for their boxing work. So when they increase their training load 4 weeks out, they better be in a good position. They better have good fitness. They better be injury free as much as possible and moving well, so that then we can get the coach working on what they need to work on in sparring, and the athlete and the boxer feels great. You know, and then it's a case of managing their training loads, so they're dropping their weight, they're sparring great, and you know, really it's there. So it's like you've probably got 8 weeks if it's a 12-week camp of where you can do some good quality work before then you have to really start to manage it.
Sorry to interrupt again, but around that, if you've got a 12-week camp working off a, say, 7 to 10 day taper, have you guys experimented with an earlier taper, you know, say week 8, 9, depending on the boxer, you know, giving them perhaps an extended weekend to recharge and have a bit of pure recovery? You guys?
Go on.
The taper for me can be anywhere between a deload. The deload probably starts for me about 2 weeks. You do a deload of the last phase for like 2 weeks out. So like if you're doing like your trap bar jumps and landmine split jerks and stuff like that from strength and conditioning perspective, that would basically be deloaded. If you're doing 10-second sprints, 12-second sprints on the curve, that would be deloaded. And then you'd go into your taper phase where like you then change some of the exercises, so doing like a lot of banded work, a lot of mobility work, light medicine ball throws and everything like that. So that's when I change it. The most recent camp with Jordan Gill, I knew that he was going to be doing 12 round and 10 round spars when he hadn't sparred for a week. So I knew that there was going to be a massive spike in training load. So I just went, right, we need to start the taper early. So we just forgot the next phase. We forgot what was planned. I just went, right, what we need to do now is a taper from here. And
you know what,
in
the previous 2 camps, we'd been watching very closely, collecting his data, monitoring his speed, monitoring his heart rate, and just speaking to him, getting his general mood. And we were probably only 1 session away from having that optimal taper, weren't we? Like he probably just tipped to overreaching a little bit, and we maybe had to pull him back just a little bit. But we had the data, and we were just like, and then that's when we collected that data, got that evidence, and Danny's then used that in this one coming up, then to just pull
clearly
it back.
It worked, because on the night he was right.
In terms of anyone that's looking for a little bit of information in terms of the scientific model that we use in periodization, Vladimir Isharin has written a lot about block periodization. So when we have distinct phases, we use block periodization, but it's more of a conjugate periodization model that Yuri Verkhoshansky has wrote about as well. So because we have different phases just humming underneath and then bring them into the next phase, it's more of a conjugate type of periodization. So block and conjugate kind of hybrid. So Isharin and Verkhoshansky are the two scientists that people want to look at.
In regards to the initial question with Rob asking about, and Danny alluding to the 3-1, in terms of deload. So yeah, we absolutely do a similar concept, but we also have a self-auto-regulatory tool in there as well. So yes, we have some structure, but generally speaking, with the markers that we have, whether it be internal, external markers of that athlete and where they're at, we can then auto-regulate that strategy. So it's not a set strategy of it has to be 3 and 1. We might do a 4 and a 1. It really does depend on the athlete and what presents itself at that given time. Something that we find as well, because we're talking about stress management, is it's popularised by Derek Hansen, a track coach in America, is utilising like microdosing strategies as well. So something that we use at the Matchroom gym with the lads is, yes, some of the big wins initially. So when I first went in there, actually, I'm sure I'm probably jumping the gun here in terms of what we're covering, but when I first went in there, I observed, I didn't go in with this kind of machine gun approach and say, well, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that right, I sat there and found out a little bit of information to then inform my decisions, which is what we do. And a couple of the wins were to pull back initially, to allow for the adaptive responses to occur. But then also we've now looked at, I've been there now 18 months. And we've got their kind of weekly structure. We've said, okay, how can we get a couple of other wins here? So something we use is this microdosing strategy around key areas, whether it be the neck, whether it be the ankle stiffness, calves, the trunk, shoulders, maybe 4 exercises, 3 or 4 sets, and we can kind of almost drip feed that in on like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday post spa to give them that little bit of extra work on concentrated areas that we want to focus on. Obviously my face-to-face time with these lads is quite limited, so I need to focus on the other qualities that we enjoy focusing on, the strength, speed and power, etc. Yes, we do some of that work I did mention in terms of, we call it like a robustness circuit. It builds robustness in those key fundamental areas. With high boxing volumes, these guys, again, I know I'm jumping the gun here in terms of what we're covering, but these guys are super overloaded through the kind of anterior shoulder complex. So if we're not, taking that into our key considerations and giving them some work to do to kind of rectify that very frequently, then something's going to break down and go wrong.
I think absolutely that's a great way to approach it as well. They've done their spa. Depending on the boxer, you might prioritise 1 or 2 things, or exactly. They might all have their own neck work that they can tag on the end, or as you said, some pulling work to offset. And you get good compliance. They're already in the gym. They're already warm. You don't have to worry about the warm-up process. You can get straight in 10-15 minutes of
literally
a couple of things, and you're getting that nice tag on. So yeah, I'm all for that. It's good.
So we've proper gone into programming there, and we've talked a long time on that. I'm not going to move on because a big theme of this section is monitoring, and what are the tools that we use in monitoring load. We're talking about 3-to-1 loading strategies. What does that consist of? What kind of tools do we use? Alan, do you want to kick us off?
The most simple thing that we use is, in terms of conditioning, is speed. Just a very diligent assessment of speed. And the reason being, let's take a sprint on the Woodway curve for an example. If we've been tracking speed of a boxer throughout a block of training, then we can prescribe very, very accurately the next training session to make sure that we're continuing adaptations. So that's one really, really simple thing. If we're doing more longer interval-based sessions, then that might be a heart rate monitor. Simple thing, knowing maximum heart rate, knowing the time that they've spent in their red zone. Have we spent enough time in there, looking at speed along with that. And then, because we can get real fancy at the university, we can measure lactate as well. So we can look at the level of acidosis that is within a particular session. Now, sometimes we might be targeting a certain magnitude of acidosis and a certain blood lactate value. Other times it's just a case of just monitoring it. So if the lads have just done 30-second sprints and we've just taken a lactate at the end, haven't we? At the end, just to characterize what it is, and these guys are producing like 20 millimolar per liter of lactate, which is completely insane. But they've been through the process now, and they can push themselves. They can access those energy pathways and produce energy in the way that we think it needs to be produced for high intensity boxing performance. So for us in the lab, we can use a lot of fancy things as well. We can use gas analyzers, which we have done before. But I think for the people that are watching, I think an essential piece of equipment is heart rate monitor. They're about £50 to buy, and they really do enable you to dial in on your training management, and enable you to track calories as well in each session. I'm sure we'll come on to making weight, but you need to know how much energy you're expending. You need to know what's going in and what's coming out, and you need to know how that's manifesting on the scales as well. So I think my key tool as a physiologist is certainly heart rate and a heart rate monitor.
First, when I went into the Matchroom gym, I didn't want to come in with these like 10 or 12 different interventions for them to do, because they won't do any. So we went in with 1 or 2 quick wins, and one was by a heart rate monitor. Just get a
Remember when Jamie and Gavin started wearing the heart rate monitors? They absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it.
For them to understand as well, and in essence then we can say, I know you've alluded to like the no man's land runs and stuff, you can see what adaptation we're trying to get. And also I said about me stepping back and viewing what's going on in the overall training process before I can make an intervention, is I want to see the heart rates that they're eliciting from sparring, from their bag work, and then that will inform my decision in terms of what I prescribe from a bioenergetic viewpoint, because if they're getting that adaptation from there, then do I need to then prioritise it elsewhere? So completely agree. It's
I think I've got a couple of comments to make away from that, and heart rate's a fantastic measure as well. I'm a big fan of the Polar H10. For me, I'll be honest, I don't think I've certainly never been in an environment where the ideal has existed for monitoring and acting upon the data. We strive for it, but it's not easy, as we all know, in the sport. Simply just looking at RPE, time and a punch volume for me is really helpful. So the Hikso from the States, or I think it's the Corner company here in the UK, where you've got the sort of half matchbox size measure in the glove, so you're getting some good data on overall training volume. And then just to raise as a sort of side topic, for me, there's no easy way of measuring lifestyle stress, right? The bigger the athlete, and obviously one of the boxers I've worked with is Anthony Joshua, and I can't comment too much on what's going on with him and what we do, but what I can comment on is that he's a man with a lot of demands on him. Sponsorship, interviews, travel, everyone wants a bit of him, social media pulling him here and there or whatever. So that exists for all of them, for many of them a smaller degree, but I think that's something that we really need to improve as a community, as coaches, to be able to support our athlete and say, look, come off your phone early, let's come up with a good sleep strategy for travel.
So I've just read a study, and perhaps we'll share this. It was tweeted last night, and it was an association in NBA basketball players, an association between late night tweeting, so after 11 p.m, and performance the next day. And they found a relationship.
Scott shared it.
Louise Burke,
Scott
so Scott, who's there, will have been looking at Professor Louise Burke's feed, because they're both nutritionists. But yes, so late night tweeting is associated with impaired performance in the game the next day.
And I think what was, this is getting into more your world, Alan, you can speak more scientifically than myself, but I love thinking about the hormone system and what that's doing to them as well. Thinking about cortisol, endorphins, dopamine, the addictive hormone that makes us check our phone, clear the notifications, we're in a queue waiting for some food, and then 5 seconds later we check our phone again, but we haven't had a notification, but the brain says, oh, give me that tiny little bit of dopamine. So it's chemical, it's real, and it's everywhere, and for an athlete it's just the same. And I think what we don't realise yet, or we're starting to realise, as you say, the research is showing us, is that persistent small microdoses of dopamine and coupled with that cortisol and the training stress and some pressure and some stress from the girlfriend or the wife or the mother or the mate or the training partner or the opponent who's calling you a bitch or whatever it is, all of those things mount up to the point where you can get burnt out from it. Forget the training, just all of that in itself. So we have to be able to understand it better and manage it well, you know, as a community.
Ticket selling as well.
Ticket selling is a big one.
Yeah, you're
big,
talking
big
about
one.
sponsorship and media. People are doing the small haul. They've got to sell them tickets. They've got to get around and
Pressure.
pressure. Because if they only sell 80 tickets, then they're not going to get paid.
Yeah, and how much of the time have we seen the fighters that are, you know, they're on their phone at 10 o'clock at night because their mate Harry wants a ticket and it's Thursday night and the fight's Saturday.
Jordan were getting phone calls on the day. And the fight, 6 o'clock, we were in the hotel lobby, it's packed up, he gets a phone call and he's just like,
Sorry.
hello? And it was somebody actually phoned him for a ticket. Obviously he didn't say, oh yeah, I'll get you one. He just went, you want the door, mate, put the phone down, because he just thought, it's my first big night in headlining my own show. I don't want to be like, leave it out, mate, or whatever.
Understanding what these guys go through. You know,
exactly.
Joe Cordina had the same thing in Cardiff. It was we were having a pre-fight meal and someone was caught. It's like, mate, just stop. Pass it on to someone else.
Yeah.
We've got a clear goal now.
People don't realise what these guys are going through, and you're saying about having a basic understanding of what they're going through, what their backgrounds are and everything like that. And you know, I hate like saying I know what you're going through, because I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what it's like to starve myself to get down to a certain weight and everything like that, so I can't say that I know what they're going through. But having an understanding is the main thing from a coach's point of view.
And that's really important, that you've got that understanding and relationship with your athlete and your boxer when they're undergoing those times of stress.
Yeah.
Because even though the endocrine system and the hormones are important, there's no easy way to measure it. Do we really want to be taking venipuncture samples and sending them off to the lab? No, we don't. No. You know, we don't even really want to go near any needles. You know, a lot of sports have got no needle policies. You know, which I think is a good thing. So we're looking at other ways in which we can try and assess that kind of demand, and it might be heart rate variability. It's very difficult to get a good stable measure. Some boxers would be are able to take those measures and are disciplined enough to use heart rate variability to do that. Some aren't. But it does require a bit of stability. It requires a lot of data and data management and data processing. So it's not easy to do, which is why having the relationship with your boxer and having a good relationship with the coach and understanding what they are going through is the best way to try and manage that training load, especially in key phases of a camp.
We're going to move on to go on. I'll let you have the final say.
Look at internal. Back to the initial question. Internal and external load monitoring. Internal would be our subjective markers, RPE, basic questionnaires. You know, we've all got flash questionnaires and graphs. I use them sometimes. I'm not going to stand there and say every single session they punch a load of stuff in. There has to be an element of compliance, and like we said about our big rocks and a couple of wins at certain times, I'd rather some other wins. And then the external load monitoring tools we utilise is just a peak velocity on the five jumps. It's based on Dan Baker's research with the Dow, so it's basic assessment of neuromuscular fatigue. You know, there are some questions there in terms of, are the jumps consistent every single time? But we've got some good research from it, and if we see a 7 to 10% drop off, we know that might be a little bit of a red flag. I need to go a bit deeper under that bonnet and have more of a conversation with that athlete on that given day if I'm asking them to, you know, exert maximal force or
For sure. I think we've covered programming and monitoring. I'm sure we could go into it much more. Moving on to weight making, it's a massive thing in boxing, and obviously we haven't got Scott with us today. Hopefully we're going to get an interview with him. He should transition to Now's the time to take a quick break, refresh, get another coffee or drink, water, reflect on some of the learnings so far, write some notes down, and start to revisit the Boxing Science Summit. This roundtable discussion was supposed to involve Dr. Scott Robinson, but he was away with one of his fighters. So we managed to get a video call with him, with Alan Ruddock, where he could answer some of the questions about nutrition and weight making in boxing.
So one of the things that I know you do very, very well is fueling for performance. So every training session is an opportunity to get better. But what I think a lot of people maybe perhaps have a little bit of misguidance on this is that they always need to be in the same negative energy balance to drop weight throughout a camp, instead of periodizing it and fueling for performance and using times within a microcycle or a week where using times within the week where you can, perhaps drop a little more calories, or perhaps add in a few more. Is that something that you think is really important to making weight?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no point in just giving an athlete a plan and saying, here you go, follow it for the next 6 weeks. You'll be in a 500 calorie deficit, so we'll therefore lose a pound of body fat a week. It just doesn't really work like that. And no 2 days are really the same. So Monday won't be the same as Tuesday. Tuesday won't be the same as a Wednesday. There needs to be variation in the total amount of calories that an athlete's consuming, and also the type of calories as well. So there's a good range of food sources to ensure that there's a good supply of different micronutrients and macronutrients so they can fuel their sessions appropriately. I think that, there's certain times when we can look to hold back a little bit more, perhaps on a rest day. If the boxer's going to have 2 days off at the weekend, or probably more likely 1 day, then we can look to restrict a little bit more. If we know there's a double training session followed by another double training session the next day, then we'll look to increase calories, and the size of that energy deficit will be slightly less so that they can fuel the sessions better. We'll also kind of periodize the carbohydrates too, just so that they're getting the right fuels in at the right time. So we'll do some sessions that are low carbohydrate, so that we kind of stimulate the fat energy system and kind of maximize training adaptations. But I think one of the biggest mistakes I see in boxers make is that they restrict carbohydrates too much during camp through fear of body fat gain. And actually, we know that the most important thing for losing body fat is to be in a negative energy balance, and those carbohydrates are so important for repeated high intensity efforts, sustaining and maintaining strength, speed, power. That I see a lot of the time boxers will, or most of the time, boxers will carb up after weigh-in, and they'll have a good fun time in doing so. But if they haven't trained with carbohydrates during their sparring or certain high intensity sessions, the body won't be primed to use those carbohydrates when they're in the ring. They might be able to get away with it for, 3, 4, 5 rounds, but it's those crucial rounds, the championship rounds between 7 and 12, that it can really show whether an athlete's primed their fat energy system and their carb energy system. And if they haven't done that through periodizing their nutrition, it can make such a huge impact.
All right, next question's on supplements. So I've seen a few images flying around, particularly in MMA and UFC recently, of some guys having unbelievable stacks of supplements that they take after they've made their weight. Some of our guys, take supplements, and there are some good ones and there are some bad ones, but just interested to get your take on supplementation for combat athletes.
Firstly, I'll probably just say that some of the best athletes that I've worked with, not necessarily boxers, they haven't touched a supplement in their life. I think a lot of the time you can cover most bases through food alone. If we can do that with the nutrition plan, then that's great. If an athlete doesn't like certain foods, and we see them getting something in that's particularly important, then we can look to implement as a supplement. If they're happy to, and we can find a really high quality tested product, then that's fine. But also, I do think that we need to make sure that all bases are covered, and there are certain supplements with a lot of evidence behind them, and certain supplements with not very much at all. So usually, if there's a supplement that we know is going to be beneficial, then we'll throw it in if the athlete's happy to do that. If we know it will do no harm, we'll put it in as a security policy. But yeah, I think that they're not, food first approach is most important. That's going to have the most bang for your buck, kind of thing. But we know there's certain things like vitamin D, particularly here in the UK, you're not going to get much. I mean, if I look outside now, it's pouring down with rain. Even like April time, it's still no sun. But we know that that's really important for bone health, muscle function, keeping immunity high as well, and preventing illness. But we know that most athletes are vitamin D deficient in the winter months. It's only really in the summertime that they become into range. So things like that, we'll look to supplement because it's difficult to get enough vitamin D from food. So yeah, I think it's not a kind of one size fits all approach. Each athlete is different in terms of what they require. After weigh-in is quite surprising that they have so many supplements. With the guys that I work with, we tend to advise them throughout camp, and then maybe after the weigh-in they'll have a couple of things, but I don't really see or know of any supplements that are going to have a major impact on performance that we need to throw a truckload of supplements into their system. I think sometimes it can be a bit of pseudoscience, and here, take this because it will do this, and really it's probably not going to do very much at that time, to be honest. But yeah,
there's very, very few supplements that will have an effect on that acute time frame, isn't there? Perhaps some concentrated supplements like beetroot juice, and maybe some New Zealand blackcurrant, things like that. Perhaps would have a beneficial effect. But
the beetroot juice is something that we typically use, but again, it's not a staple across all the fighters, because some fighters respond differently to the taste of the beetroot juice. We definitely and we'll always have to trial it during camp as well, which means that if you look at one of the beat it shots, I think off the top of my head it has around about 400 milligrams of nitrates, which is the kind of magic dose, but also it has 32 grams of carbohydrate. So is there space to fit that in and be able to practice with that? Because I'm not just going to give it to them after weigh-in and let them try it for the first time at such a crucial time. So there's all these kind of different things to consider. And then we know that you need about 3 to 4 days of loading the nitrates for it to fully take effect. But actually, on the final couple of days before the weigh-in, we can't really afford an extra 32 grams of carbohydrates. I'd rather get that from food. And the nitrate shots also have salt in, and we'll look to reduce salt so that we take away the extracellular fluid so they can drop the weight more easily. So again, it's not as easy just to kind of throw things in and say, here, have this. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always individual specific. First of all, the most important thing would be to make sure that it's safe for use, and that it's batch tested. So if you just go on to informsport.com, you can plug either in whey protein into the search bar, and it will show you the whey protein supplements that have been tested. Or you can go onto a particular supplement website, maybe Science in Sport, and you can look at the whey protein there, and then you can put in the batch code into Inform Sport just to check that particular batch has been tested. I don't affiliate myself with any supplement companies, but Science in Sport is particularly good because it triple tests for banned substances at 3 stages of the production process. Whereas most companies will only do it once at the end. So it's almost, you can never be 100% sure that a supplement's safe, but by triple checking it, it kind of greatly reduces the risk that it does contain a banned substance. I think, athletes need to be super careful with the supplements they are taking. We're now seeing supplements on supermarket shelves as well. Even things that might be in disguise, like protein water, that's technically a supplement. Where did that protein come from? Did it come from a factory where other supplements are made that may contain banned substances? There's quite a scary article released from, I think it was UK Anti-Doping or WADA the other month, which showed that 1 in 10 supplements sourced off the shelf, if you were just to go into Holland and Barrett or a supermarket, 1 in 10 would contain a banned substance. So for me, it's just not worth taking the risk. And again, that's where I only work with so many boxers, because I need to make sure that there's great communication, but also I look after them with supplements. So usually I will order the supplements for them, go through that process of checking and serial numbers to make sure it's safe to take and been tested, and then have it delivered to them rather than even to their own devices to get it, and take that risk.
To an interview now, but if we don't, I do want to cover it because I think it's a massive thing. From like the boxers that I work with, I'm like kind of, especially like people like Jordan and Fowler, I'm like a strength and conditioning coach, yes, but I'm also like a bit like a performance manager without the official title. Yeah. I'm keeping an eye on the weight, keeping an eye on the wellness and everything like that. I'm not a nutritionist, but when it comes, I think, to just people like making weight, they've just got to be so data driven. They've got to be data driven. Like like we're saying about like training in the gym and conditioning. Sometimes you don't have to be as close to the numbers as we'd like to be as sports scientists, strength and conditioning coaches. But with nutrition, you've got to be data driven. You've got to be working out what our basal metabolic rate is. We need to know how many calories we're burning a day in our S&C session, in our boxing sessions as well. Because if not assessing, you're guessing big time. As well, taking your weight every day. I think I'm a big believer in that because you get an idea of where you're at, because the fluctuate and get an idea of what your daily fluctuations are. Because if you drop, like let's say, an extra 200-300 calories, and then you expend an extra 200-300 calories in your boxing, and then that can have a big impact on your weight the next day. Let's say you take off 2 pounds, or let's say at a weekend you don't manage your training right, you don't manage your nutrition right, you put on another 2 pounds over the weekend. And just knowing what your fluctuations are, there's too many boxers that I've worked with where they're just getting weighed in on a Friday or on towards the back end of the week where they've burnt a few calories, but like the muscle glycogen stores are a little bit more depleted. They might be after training where they've sweated it out. They've just got to get a better understanding of what the weight is. And when they're making weight, they're talking about the stress and the lifestyle stress. It's the stress in itself making weight, and a lot of boxers burn their head in under the stand with it, thinking, I don't want to know what my weight is, or I'll check my weight tomorrow, or I'll check my weight towards the end of the week. You've got to be at one with your weight and your daily fluctuations and everything like that, making sure that you're getting the right amount of calories in to make sure that you're getting that deficit.
And one thing to think about as well, based on that those time points in between, there might be a week or there might be even greater. Dropping weight isn't a linear process. It doesn't happen like that. There's, like Danny said, there's fluctuations up and down all the time, and you need to be understanding those fluctuations and have the data to be confident that those fluctuations will be there and will be present. So if you're taking your weight on a Friday, but then you expect to drop X amount the next Friday, but it hasn't happened, maybe there has been some fluctuations through the week and you have come down, just maybe you're on a little bit of a blip there and the next day you'll be down here. So I think, it's not linear and it's never straightforward.
We're in a unique sport as well, as we're not just trying to fuel performance. We have to make weight. Our sport is governed by making weight, so it's not just a matter of let's fuel for this given session. So in essence, we look at that on like the macro level of, it'd be great if Scott was here, and I know he's going to add a lot more than I can on this very subject because I've worked with him as part of a team, but utilising high days and low days based on the energy demands of that given day. So in essence, if, for example, and we wouldn't normally program it in this manner, but let's say they had a strength session and sparring on the same day, well, that would be a pretty high day in terms of the energy demands of that given day. So you need to be adequately fueled for that. The next day might be a lower intensity recovery run or something like that. Well, okay, well, that's a way we can actually really influence body composition and maybe go in a little bit lower, so that's something that we do implement. But yeah, Scott will, I'm sure, blow that out.
No, there is one school of thought that you have to, in order to drop weight, you have to always have a long steady run in there or a fasted run in there. But really, you're not fueling performance there. You don't need to do that, because if we've got a boxer that goes on a long steady run, one, we're not getting the adaptations that we want in a high intensity sport from that. Two, they're putting a lot of load, especially if it's a run on the road. They're putting a lot of load from the body, and they're increasing their training load. The movement patterns are suboptimal for the sport, especially if they're doing a lot of it, and they're actually not burning that many calories when they do it.
No.
It might be 600, 700, perhaps 800 calories. Now think about where you can get those gains from. Well, that's from your diet. You can drop a significant portion of the calories that you're expending in that long, slow, steady run just by dietary manipulation. So without that additional stress, and
I just meant a lower day.
Yeah.
and what you can do is fuel that performance and periodize your nutrition, not just around the high and the low days, which is important, but periodize it in terms of within the day, so that might make sure that you're eating the right amount of foods, hydrating the right way in preparation for that high intensity session, and then recovering the right way. And then either side of that, that's where you can limit your calories if you need to do that, and drop weight through calorie restriction. Fuel for the session. But also periodizing nutrition across the camp as well. If you're trying to crash weight at the start of the camp and drop a load of calories straight away, that is not the way to do it, because that's going to catch up to you, and you're not going to be able to drop the weight later on in camp when actually it's more critical.
Following on from that, I mean, I'll add my 2 pence, and it is just that, because this isn't my field either, but trying to adopt an 80-20 approach out of camp, because I think so much of the time, especially the amateurs, they break out of camp, they haven't got as much contact with their S&C coach, their technical coach, if they have a nutritionist. I mean, generally all you guys maintain contact all year round, obviously, but we find they go off and the diet completely goes out the window, the training drops massively, and they obviously pack on 10 kilos quite quickly, and it's a nightmare when they're coming back in. So I think just generally just to ensure that you're monitoring them outside of camp, so that it's less of a difficult process when they're coming.
You need to know what their highest weight is.
Do you set an upper limit with your guys?
Yeah.
Out of camp, you do as well.
Yeah. We want to retain as much lean tissue as possible, and so if the weight making process is wrong from a nutritional aspect and you're crashing a lot of weight, especially if, first of all, what's the first thing to go? It's going to be muscle. You're going to lose lean tissue, and we don't want that, because effective punching requires a lot of momentum of the punching arm. So if you're losing muscle mass, then you're not going to be able to create that force, and you're not going to be able to retain that lean tissue in order to contribute to momentum of the punching arm and the rest of the segments as well, especially around the core. That will be a very, very an area to go very, very quickly. And we retain quite a lot of fatty tissue around our trunk as well. And so if we're crashing a lot of weight quickly, and we know we're not dropping the mass through fat, and it's through lean tissue, then you're compromising performance when you have to take shots around the trunk, and you have to produce rotational forces around the trunk as well to have an effective punch. So a lot of it comes down to trying to preserve as much lean tissue as possible, and making sure
manipulation of the protein.
Exactly, yeah. And you don't need a lot of protein in order to retain lean tissue, but it just needs to be provided in the right way at the correct time, and drip fed in the right manner throughout the day and throughout the camp as well.
And if they are in a calorie deficit and you're trying to keep them at a level of the protein, in your experience, you keeping them just over body weight, 1.2 kilos.
It has gone higher before. It can go up to 2. It can go up to 2.
But low, is there a threshold for no?
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be any lower than that 1.2, 1.5ish. That kind of boundary is optimal. And just dropping in like 20 grams of protein, just 3-4 hours throughout the day, just to retain that level of muscle protein synthesis.
I think what we're just going to finish on with, in terms of like making weight, is just knowing that it's not just making weight and just getting down to your championship fighting weight. It's actually having to do that in the right ways. There's a lot of acute strategies that you can use that can help you make that weight a lot better and feel a lot stronger. You know, you'll go to a weigh-in, and 9 times out of 10 every boxer will make weight, but it's about making weight in that right way and getting to that end goal in the best possible way. And it's like doing stuff like doing low residue diets, doing water loading, cutting sodium out. You know, once I with an athlete that wasn't was stagnating in his weight when he was coming down to weight, I was like thinking, right, what is it like? We were out on training camp. I was talking with a nutritionist back at home, and I was just like, right, let's have a look at his diet and what he's having. And I actually looked in, and there were like some with like pickled
beetroots and
pickled beetroots,
things like that in the salad.
So I took them
Can't
out.
think anything of, would you?
Yeah, you wouldn't think anything of, because it's healthy, but because it's been like preserved in pickle, they had a lot of sodium in there. Took that out, lost £1.5 pound overnight just by taking that out of the diet. And it's like little things like that, especially on fight week, that can have a massive impact on how you make weight.
I think it's an educational process for the athletes as well, in the form of like how they're cooking, what they're cooking with. You know, they might put some olive oil or something in there. They don't know that that's got calories in it. You know, so it's just it is a process that we have to educate them on.
It's like having them smart decisions at Nando's and everything like that. Macho peas, 300 calories in them.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe you
think,
didn't know that.
oh, I'm being good, I'm having peas, but it's 300 calories, might as well have some chips.
Yeah.
Okay, take another break now because we had to quickly jump up, jump round and get ourselves warm in that freezing cold gym. So I suggest you take a break now. But before we go back to the Boxing Science Summit, I'd like to further remind you about the Combat Conditioning Conference 2019, which is now available on pre-order at 50% discount, and this finishes on April 30th. The link is in the description below for more information, but check out this video which tells you everything that you need to know. So the next subject that I want to talk about, I'm going to use your expertise here, the common injuries in boxing, and how can these be easily prevented?
Well, this is obviously a gigantic topic, and we need a day, and we could all talk about it for a day. To put it in a nutshell, if I can, which is not easy, rather than common injuries, I think the most common reason we get issues is because of inappropriate training load monitoring. So there's too quick a spike, or as we were talking about earlier, there's too much sparring coupled with too much S&C, and you know the cup is too full. And 9 times out of 10, this is what I see. And what can be frustrating for us is managing that around common injuries, particularly around training load issues. We see issues with the shoulder. And the lower back typically, and elbow and wrist articular issues we commonly get. So I think a lot of the topics we've already talked about: training load monitoring, communication as a team, knowing when to pull back. Those are some of those key things that that we really need to get right. I don't necessarily need to talk on those because we've already covered them well. I think again with managing a boxer in a team, it's about being confident when to pull them back and giving them the right type of exercise as priorities. Because we've all studied and we were academic, and you can have an ideal in your head. I've always got that ideal, and I know you have, and you guys as well. Okay, I might say this guy's got a reactive tendinopathy as a result of his third week in sparring was too heavy a spike, and he was also overdoing it in the gym. And now I'm dealing with a reactive tendinopathy of the shoulder. So how am I going to approach this? Because we're in the early part of a camp. So I might say there's 8 exercises that are key for him to do, coupled up with mobility. And the reality is he's probably not going to do them all. And I know you get a degree of hesitancy from a lot of fighters that, I don't want to do all of that, it'll make it worse, or they're a bit tentative about doing too much. So for me, just like Dan said earlier, find your window to get the rehab in, and rather than be reactive to that injury, try and be proactive. So at the end of a spar or at the end of a boxing session, he's just finished on the bag, adding some banded pull-aparts, adding some triple threats, adding some neck conditioning to help prevent issues there. Because the reality is, if you write an injury prevention program for boxers to do twice a week, they're not going to do it. So find your windows to put it in, and there's no easy way of doing it, but that would be my kind of nutshell, really. Just to be realistic.
I think that's spot on, Rob, and I think you hit the nail on the head there about being proactive and not reactive. You're not reacting to a certain issue once the issue arises, because the wheels are very much in motion in terms of a camp then, and it's very hard to then make an intervention whilst you've got all this additional stress. So we can obviously do a basic needs analysis of the sport, and we've all worked in this sport for a long period of time, and common things tend to occur, whether let's start at the top, whether it's around the shoulder complex, whether it's around the thoracic spine influencing the shoulder, whether we're then looking at the lumbar spine, what's going on around the pelvic region. And so, we tend to see common patterns. So that's where we can make an intervention. And that's why I alluded to the microdosing earlier around those key patterns, that we can get a bit of a win there. And it is only 15 minutes in and around their sparring sessions. Once, like you said, they're already warm, they're already mobile. But going to the specifics of injury, again, I say specifics, but in a general broad term of our sport, the shoulders are obviously, I know you did the boxer's shoulder last year on this very conference, and which was awesome. So I think the basic way of looking at it is these guys are so anteriorly dominant and overloaded through their high boxing volumes, is how can we get a bit of a win? Okay, well, there's some key areas that we can speak about, maybe in and around, the pec minor. We can release that. That's going to stop the shoulder kicking forwards. Obviously the pec minor's linked in with the scapula in terms of scapula tilting forwards. We can get our banded pull-aparts in. We can then look at our trunk. We can look at what's going on at the hips. So there's key areas there that we can absolutely influence with our programming. So it's just, again, being smart with our program and looking at the specifics of our sport, and then making an intervention from there on in.
One thing you're saying about trying to get in the mobility training, I do the same warm-up every single session, and it's I really focus on rotational mobility, shoulder mobility, hip mobility, and glute strength, and they know the routine. So sometimes when we're busy at the gym, I'm upstairs doing the conditioning work with somebody. I'll come downstairs, and let's say I'm 5 minutes late. I'm sorry everyone, but sometimes 5 minutes late, I'll walk in, the athlete's already there. They're already there doing the eagles, doing the windmills.
And it's so pleasing, isn't it, to see as a coach.
It's brilliant.
Like we have, I do it very, very similar. We have our movement prep, move with the purpose to improve. We want to own certain positions, etc. And when an athlete, again, I'll refer to Conor Ben because he is brilliant in this regard. I see him at BXR on a separate day because we were managing. We found that he was burning out a little bit on the set days that we did have. So we then changed, we intervened and changed his training day. So he comes and sees me at a different gym. I don't see him at the Matchroom gym anymore. And I say, look, I've got a limited time, you have to get here earlier. And he gets here earlier, he's there on the foam roller, he's doing his work, he's mobilising his T-spine, he's moving and grooving. And it's so pleasing for a coach to see an athlete do that. And a case in point again on that one is John Doherty. He won't mind me saying this, very new in the relationship. John Doherty turned over from the amateurs. He's really brought into this overall process of strength and conditioning, and he's doing very well with it, both in the gym and in the ring. And one of my colleagues had to train him. I had to go away with a client for a couple of weeks, and one of my colleagues, James Collins at BXR, said he'd come in and run the program with John, and John needed a session. And I knew John wasn't doing his warm-ups, all right? Because he was the first guy I saw at the Matchroom gym. And I'd say, Doc, have you done your warm-up strategy? Yeah, Dan, I've done it. I feel good. All right, John, let's get cracking then, okay? Anyway, my mate messages me, he says, Dan, I don't know what the hell you've got him doing for these warm-ups, mate, because he does not know your warm-up routine. And I called him that night. I said, Doc, you've let me down, mate, in front of one of my colleagues. You haven't executed. And he said, Dan, I'm sorry, mate. And now the warm-up flows. He's really brought into it, but it took that little bit of a, situation for him to do that.
Good stuff.
In terms of injuries, you mentioned vitamin D just a few minutes ago. Do you think that nutrition has an important role to play in injury prevention or injury reduction and even recovery from injury?
Yeah, 100%. I think if the nutrition isn't right, then you greatly increase the risk of illness and also injury. I think that's where the testing comes in useful. Like I said, with the DEXA scan, we can take a look at bone mineral density. And we know if that's quite low or not within the optimal range, and it's something that we can work on during the early stages of camp when the boxer might just be coming back in to boost that bone mineral density into the optimal range, and then through appropriate nutrition, and then they can start their kind of heavy phase of camp in a good position. I think hydration is absolutely key. I see a lot of time in boxing that athletes will weigh themselves after training and take that as their true weight. And as a result of knowing that they're going to weigh after training, they won't drink much during training because they think, well, I'll be lighter afterwards. When actually they could be training between 2% and 10% dehydrated. We know that the greater the severity or degree of the dehydration, the more risk of injury. So I'll always have the fighters weigh first thing in the morning fasted, just because that's the most accurate representation of true weight. And then during sparring or whatever training it is, I have them weigh themselves before and after and try and be no more than 2 to 3% dehydrated whilst training. And again, that can greatly reduce the risk of injury and also mean they can get a lot more from their session in terms of output too.
The main thing that you said in terms of preventing injury, well, most people watching this would be thinking, it's going to drop an exciting like mobility exercise drills or something like that. But you said about training load management straight away, and this is something that takes no talent to do. It doesn't need any of us to really hone in on it. Really, sometimes it can come from the boxing side as well, in terms of like taking session amount of minutes times RPE. It's pretty. Yeah. You can see when it's a high day and a low day, really, get them athletes taking ownership of that.
And I haven't got data on it, but anecdotally, I'd say there's two higher risk areas for viewers to be aware of. Is week one, and then just like pre and during peak. So as they come straight back into boxing again, that week I often find is when you get those little niggles because they're still running, they're still lifting, and they're started boxing, and little things show their face. So again, being proactive, not reactive in that prior week. So are they ready to be hitting the bag? Are they ready to? Obviously maybe not sparring week one, but and then that peak week just coming in. Okay, have you, as an S&C coach, have you taken your foot off the pedal because it's a big sparring week? Is their rest optimal? Is their anabolic system ideal growth hormone levels, and are they nurtured and recovering well at night so that they're really giving that hormonal system the best chance of recovery? So, and again, just how we can just monitor and keep an eye on that as a team as two risk factors that I think is good to bear in mind, and you can't necessarily always prevent issues. It's the nature of the sport, so it's just being able to sort of look out for it.
I think that's a great point to finish on. It's been fantastic to get this sit down. I know that we've been wanting to do this for about 2 years now, haven't we? To get around and just put our thoughts together. It's been brilliant. It's about, I don't even know how long it's been now, an hour and a half worth of content. Hopefully we haven't bored you. But yeah, let's go around and say what we feel that the future of boxing is, what is actually needed from a strength and conditioning perspective. I'm happy to kick us off.
Great, yeah.
I believe that, we were talking off camera, us three earlier, about habits, and that we're trying to break boxers out of the habits that they've had for a lifetime of going on long runs, being able to just smash the bag and do whatever in the first week, thinking that they need to get back into it. We're breaking them habits, but I believe a big way in the future to break them habits is to have it as part of their training as early on, and this is why we're doing the youth athlete initiative. We're placing a lot of our work in youth training, and Tommy Mundy's doing a great job with that in terms of educating the coaches and educating the athletes as well. We're wanting strength and conditioning to be a big part of youth development, because you look at the landscape at the moment, is that you've got thousands of amateur boxers at grassroots level, and they only get the strength and conditioning being made available to them when they're at GB boxing. So you're talking your 20 boxers that are on the GB program. Before that, we're doing stuff with England boxing. That's a bit limited at the minute, but we're trying to do as much as we can. But where do they get that athletic development going along with their technical development as well?
Right, because they're, in essence, we're getting them when their training age is relatively low. So yeah, it makes us look good initially, so we can get these positive adaptations, but it'd be ideal if they'd started a lot earlier and they'd gone through that process, so we get them at a later date with better movement competency for sure. So you guys are doing a great job with the LTAD program, as Tommy alluded to yesterday. He was telling me about it, and I think that's brilliant. If you can influence not just the kids but the coaches, if you can get the coaches on side and get them buying into your methods, and we've got a unique opportunity now because of the power of social media and everything's being filmed on BT, Sky, etc. They see these elite pros in the gym with their strength and conditioning coaches, so they're obviously intrigued as to what's going on. So if we can get in now and use that to our advantage and educate these people properly and take them through the process.
The social media content of Anthony Joshua doing loads of strength and conditioning, people are going, well, I always use it with the young boxers. I'll say, if the biggest name in British boxing, biggest name in world boxing is doing strength and conditioning, why aren't you doing it? And when I've been with England boxing, they've still got pictures of AJ on the wall, like doing the stretching, doing the warm-up, and says if he finds it important, then you should find it important as well.
Where he is,
yeah. What do you think's important, Rob?
Yeah, so I mean, the future of boxing, for us, how can it be even better than it already is? Because I think we're in a good place. We can certainly be in a better place. To simplify, I would say I think it's important for a professional fighter to have a performance lead or performance manager. It might just be that he's only got one person. He may just have you, Danny, which would be a great thing. But then, of course, you're the core communicator to the technical coach, right? Yeah. But you may have 8 individuals. You may have a nutritionist and psychologist, etc. That performance lead has to be able to gather all of the qualitative and quantitative feedback and data from the fighter and the team to make an informed decision when we're okay to continue to push and when we need to pull. Because right now, I still don't think that there's quite, in many circles, the ability for the performance lead to tell the coach, don't train today. And often the technical coach will push on anyway. So I think that's where the future is, because I think if we can get to the point where all of what we're gathering can inform us, and we can say to the coach who trusts that process, all right, we're going to push hard today, or we're going to do the opposite, then we stand more chance of bringing in every fighter in peak condition, just like Jordan was recently, and just like Conor was for the last fight, and hopefully just like AJ will be for the New York fight coming up. And you know, it's a challenge to get them there, but I think if we do the simple things well, and all of those things we've talked about today, there's no reason why we can't achieve that.
The golden thread that runs throughout all our recommendations for the future is education. You know, education of the young athlete, education of the performance director, you know, the lead performance manager, and the coach, you know, and the education of the boxers too. But I also think the strength and conditioning coaches as well. At the moment, there's no standardization of coaching, you know, and I would really like it if we had everyone had a level platform and an ability to have a standardized approach to strength and conditioning in boxing, and really had a great platform to learn about best practice in boxing, because we have got, you know, we talk quite a bit, you know, and we're working at quite an elite level, but it's still only 4 or 5 guys, you know, talking about this, and there's so many other coaches, you know, not just in the UK but around the world working in boxing and bringing in their experiences and their strengths from other sports and into boxing. But boxing's unique. It's a unique sport with several constraints which you need to understand, you know. And I think if we can have some form of accreditation, you know, or some kind of formal education in terms of preparing strength and conditioning coaches to work in boxing, then I think that's going to benefit the whole of combat sports. I think, you know, the UFC Performance Institute are doing a great job at raising the profile and raising the standards in the UFC and in MMA, and I think, you know, we've got a unique opportunity here, and I think for the Combat Conditioning Conference is just one little part of that little education process. But I think if we can go in the future and have a range of coaches around in the UK and around the world, learning from a standardized process and understanding best practice in strength and conditioning in boxing, I think that's going to be.
You guys are driving that forward, so, you know, not to big you up too much, but it's absolutely brilliant, the course that you are putting on in London these days, you know, and upskilling these guys and girls, and they're coming on the course and going away with so many take-homes. So the bar is being raised, but I completely agree. We need things like this just to get a good message out there, you know, and hopefully there's been some real good value and take-homes from today. But for any coach watching, just keep it simple, understand the sport, do your research, nothing flash, you know. We've used the word adaptation, we're looking for these positive adaptations. So yeah, just don't go crazy with it. Understand your athlete, communicate with them, and keep it simple. Yeah, it would be my kind of take homes.
Good stuff. That's a great note to finish on. Thanks so much for your time, Dan. Good luck with all the boxers at Matchroom Boxing and at BXR. Rob, good luck with Anthony Joshua, and
good luck trying to keep up with you.
Yeah. You know, I'll see you whenever. Thanks so much for your time and sharing your knowledge and experience. I'm sure that people watching are going to be very happy with what they've taken down. You know, like I said, we've got years of experience. We've worked at the very highest level, but we know how to adapt these training methods as well. And hopefully people find it quite accessible and full of like motivation to go on and take some of the key learning points and start putting it into their coaching and into their training as well. I think it's time for us to put an extra layer on because they're absolutely freezing. But hopefully guys we'll get together again. Boxing Science Summit 2020. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for watching the Boxing Science Summit 2019. Hopefully you found that really beneficial and you took some good notes and key learning points, and I hope it's motivated you to start applying sports science into your training. This has been quite a long process for us to put this together. A lot of organisation, us all meeting in one place, filming, editing, and we're putting this out there for free to benefit the boxing community. So if we could please share this video with 2 or 3 friends privately, or you can put it on your social media channel, because we're wanting to try and get this information out there to as many people as possible to make the best sport in the world even better. Okay, thanks very much for watching. If anybody's got any questions or comments or queries, you can comment below, or you can send us an email at boxing.sci@gmail.com.